Fionn wiped the blood from his nose and got back on his feet, expressing his frustration towards Mord, claiming that Mord was merely lucky with his punch. Mord retorted, stating that Fionn's weakness was the reason for his victory, not luck. Fionn, fueled by anger, launched another attack on Mord, shouting at him to be quiet. However, Mord skillfully evaded Fionn's punch and counterattacked with a powerful kick. The impact sent Fionn flying, crashing into a nearby wall. Mord found himself shocked by Fionn's lack of strength, considering him to be much weaker than anticipated for a third-level Vernars. Reflecting on the situation, Mord questioned whether his knowledge of basic mana combat techniques from the first and second levels played a role, or if the original Mord possessed an instinctual mastery of those techniques. He contemplated the possibility that the current Mord might be weaker than his novel counterpart. A concerned trainee approached Fionn, urging him to gather himself and asking if he was alright. Fionn, still in shock, responded with confusion. Determined to continue the fight, he quickly regained his composure and declared that it wasn't over yet. Mord informed Fionn that he had actually lost consciousness for at least 10 seconds. Fionn angrily refuted this, claiming that Mord had taken advantage of a momentary lapse in his guard. Mord dismissed Fionn's explanation, criticizing him for letting his guard down as someone aspiring to become a warrior. Fionn, consumed by rage, was enveloped in a red aura throughout his entire body. He admonished Mord for speaking without filter and expressing every thought that came to mind. The other trainees were shocked by Fionn's sudden power surge, and someone called for the instructor, fearing that Fionn might pose a danger. One of the trainees warned Mord to flee as well, anticipating that Fionn might potentially harm him. However, Mord remained unfazed, casually remarking on the situation. He speculated that Fionn was tapping into a power called New Blood, but he appeared to lack control over it, likening it more to mana. Mord attributed this to the fact that there were likely more individuals at that level with similar circumstances. Just then, an old man named Instructor Daisley arrived at the scene, questioning the commotion. A trainee informed him about the fight between the new guy and Fionn, expressing concern and suggesting they intervene. However, Instructor Daisley decided to observe instead, thinking that Fionn's strength was comparable to that of a normal warrior. He saw this as an opportunity to properly assess Fionn's power. Observing Mord, Instructor Daisley realized that he must be the Vernar's kid who started that day, and he casually contemplated that it wouldn't cause much trouble if one bastard child were to die. Fionn, with an evil smile, warned Mord that he would pay for making him angry and initiated an attack. Mord recognized Fionn's technique as Body Impulse, an advanced skill that utilized the body or a weapon to create a stronger energy form. Mord managed to evade the attack by stepping back, realizing that getting hit by it would be detrimental. Fionn swiftly closed the distance between them, admonishing Mord not to dare run away. He threw a punch, but Mord swiftly retaliated with a punch to Fionn's head. Fionn was taken aback and expressed his frustration, questioning why his attacks weren't effective against someone who didn't even use the New Blood power. On the sidelines, a watching trainee marveled at Mord's ability to evade every hit, while another trainee noted that Mord's attacks were also missing their mark. However, Instructor Daisley believed that Mord had landed at least one hit, as he could perceive a decrease in his impulse. Fionn, panting heavily, insulted Mord, calling him a rat. Mord counterattacked, deciding to be more serious this time. He landed a punch on Fionn's stomach, sending him flying backward and causing him to exclaim in pain. Apologizing for the impact, Mord admitted that he had tried to hold back but acknowledged that it still hurt. Fionn, fueled by anger, dismissed Mord's words, accusing him of being a coward who only knew how to run away. Fionn, frustrated, thought to himself that it would have been over if he had landed just one more hit. He shouted at Mord, claiming that Mord was running around because he knew that Fionn could defeat him with a single strike. Mord smiled confidently and declared that he would stop dodging, no longer holding back against Fionn's irritations. Fionn smirked, thinking that his plan had worked. He charged at Mord, throwing a punch that created a red glow upon impact. To Fionn's surprise, Mord remained unfazed and caught Fionn's hand. Mord remarked that impulse didn't do much when facing a much weaker opponent, considering it a valuable lesson. He then gathered blue mana in his hand. In shock, Fionn realized that it was common sense for an impulse user to always defeat a non-user, but Mord seemed to be an exception. Fionn came to the realization that he had started a fight he could never win. Mord retaliated by throwing a punch at Fionn, who shouted as the blow struck him, sending him flying and crashing into the wall. Instructor Daisley couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. He questioned where a monster like Mord had come from, as even a talented bastard child couldn't bridge the gap between themselves and a direct bloodline. If Mord was already this strong at the age of 15, He was essentially a monster. Mord turned around and challenged anyone else who wanted to fight. Instructor Daisley instructed a trainee to quickly take Fionn to the medical center. Daisley realized that if he didn't take action, the order of command within the training facility would be compromised. Despite Mord's exceptional abilities, he was still a bastard son with no support system. Daisley made a vow that he would surely tame him. Mord contemplated the condition of Fionn, who had been seriously injured in a recent fight and was currently in a coma at the medical center. As a result, Mord found himself on probation for 4 days. He closed the tactic theory book he had been reading, deeming it too easy for his level of knowledge. Being a graduate school student, he believed the written test wouldn't pose a problem. Feeling bored staying in the dorm all day, he decided to practice the mana combat technique. Just then, he heard a voice calling his name. It was Instructor Todd. Mord greeted him, curious as to why he was there. Todd commented on how Mord never allowed a quiet day to pass by, revealing that the Archduke wanted to see him. Mord questioned the reason for the Archduke's interest in him. Instructor Todd assured him that he would find out once they arrived and mentioned that etiquette wouldn't be a major concern since Mord was not expected to be well versed in aristocratic customs. Mord agreed, recalling that even in the novel, Archduke Vernars wasn't fond of aristocratic formalities. Todd mentioned the prevalent rumors about Mord, particularly regarding his exploits in the first and second level training grounds, which seemed unbelievable. Mord acknowledged that he hadn't anticipated things to be so easy either. Todd praised his intelligence, expressing his belief that others shared the same opinion. Confused, Mord asked for clarification. Todd suggested that Mord's actions were a deliberate plan to catch the Archduke's attention. Mord refuted this, stating that he wouldn't risk embarrassing himself just for the Archduke's attention. If he truly sought the Archduke's recognition, he would have focused on becoming a powerful warrior instead. Todd silently acknowledged that Mord's perspective held validity, recognizing that being a formidable warrior would indeed be a superior path to gaining the Archduke's attention. Todd informed him that the Archduke had received reports about the previous day's events and had taken an interest in Mord. Mord commented that defeating a Vernars was indeed something worthy of the Archduke's attention. Todd cautioned Mord to avoid drawing too much attention as they approached the Archduke's training grounds. Mord agreed and followed Todd. Upon entering, Mord witnessed a man standing within a barrier while others attacked and attempted to break it. Mord recognized the overwhelming aura of power emanating from the man, realizing that it was Archduke Vernars himself. The assailants relentlessly attacked the barrier, causing cracks to appear, but it remained intact. As the Archduke noticed Mord's presence, he commanded everyone to back off. The barrier vanished, and a red vortex materialized in the Archduke's hand. Mord recognized the skill the Archduke possessed, God of Combat's Mirror. It was an overpowering ability that absorbed both magical and physical attacks, converting them into shockwaves thrown back at the opponent. The Archduke aimed the attack at a wall, causing a massive explosion upon collision. Mord observed that the skill was still in the process of being developed at this point in time. The Archduke expressed his dissatisfaction with the efficiency of the skill, and Mord marveled at its strength despite being incomplete. The Archduke then turned towards Mord and Todd, acknowledging their presence. Both Mord and Todd kneeled down and greeted the Archduke. The Archduke dispensed with formalities and told them to rise. Approaching Mord, the Archduke mentioned that he had called Mord there because he didn't want to deal with etiquette. He then remarked that he had heard Mord had done some interesting things at the training facility. Mord looked at the Archduke and couldn't help but feel intimidated, despite the Archduke not making a deliberate effort to intimidate him. The Archduke, still holding Mord's chin, inquired about his mother. Mord stammered and replied that his mother was Reyna. The Archduke recalled Reyna and remarked that Mord seemed to take after her more than him. He then asked if Mord had undergone his new blood awakening earlier in the year, to which Mord confirmed. The Archduke mentioned hearing about Mord's victory against Impulse using only body reinforcement, and expressed his desire to see how strong Mord truly was. He called out for Kessner, who kneeled before him. The Archduke instructed Kessner to spar with Mord. Kessner hesitated, seemingly surprised that he was being asked to spar with Mord, but ultimately agreed upon the Archduke's request. Mord observed that Kessner was one of the 10 people who had been training with the Archduke earlier. Kessner invited Mord to the sparring field and offered him the option of using a weapon. However, Mord declined, stating that he never learned how to wield a weapon and would fight with his fists instead. Kessner expressed surprise but accepted Mord's decision. As the spar began, Kessner immediately launched a punch at Mord, but Mord skillfully dodged the attack. Mord acknowledged Kessner's speed, recognizing him as one of the Archduke's close personnel. Kestner continued his assault, and Mord realized that Kestner was on another level compared to the opponents he had faced before. Kestner landed a powerful kick on Mord, sending him sliding backward. Approaching Mord with his body enveloped in fiery mana, Kestner commended Mord's spirit and noted that Mord wasn't giving his all despite being cornered. Kestner declared that he would no longer go easy on Mord. Mord realized that Kestner was channeling his mana, indicating his connection to the Vernar's bloodline. Reflecting on his current identity as Mord, he recognized that he had never fought with all his strength since becoming Mord. Mord was determined to give it his all against Kestner and activated his mana, and prepared to fight at his fullest potential. Their mana collided, with Mord's bluish mana clashing with Kestner's fiery mana. The Archduke watched the exchange with interest, impressed by the display. Kestner was surprised by Mord's mana and questioned if it belonged to a trainee. Meanwhile, Mord reflected on the Mord from the story and how he likely never reached his full potential due to the guilt and the negative perceptions surrounding him. However, the current Mord was determined to live up to that potential and fully utilize his powers. With renewed resolve, Mord readied himself for the fight and challenged Kestner. Kestner smiled in response and swiftly approached Mord, launching a punch while declaring his intent to teach him a lesson. The impact of the punch created a massive shockwave, but Mord remained standing, protected by his armed guards. Impressed by Mord's resilience, Kestner acknowledged that the rumors about Mord weren't fake but deemed his efforts useless. But suddenly he got pushed back even though Kestner hadn't attacked again. Mord grew confused, realizing that he had blocked the attack, leading him to speculate if Kestner possessed a skill that doubled his strikes. Kestner launched another attack, expressing that Mord still had much to learn. Frustrated by the gap between their abilities, Mord felt defeated. Kestner's punch landed on Mord's stomach, sending him flying and crashing into a wall. Kestner declared that he hadn't even started yet and urged Mord not to disappoint him. Kestner challenged Mord, urging him to give his all in the fight. Mord realized there was a significant gap between them despite not using his full power. He contemplated whether to use his new blood power, but hesitated, knowing Kestner would likely do the same. Kestner noted Mord's deep in thought and launched another attack, determined to push him to his limits. However, Mord retaliated by punching the ground, catching Kestner off guard. As Kestner backed off, he expressed satisfaction, as that was what he wanted from Mord. Mord decided not to reveal his full potential at that moment but couldn't tolerate taking hits without fighting back. He aimed to land at least one attack. The exchange of blows continued between Mord and Kestner. Kestner criticized Mord, pointing out that his attack movements were too large and his combat skills were still at a beginner level. Despite Kestner throwing a punch, Mord blocked it effortlessly with one arm, predicting his opponent's move. Kestner was shocked by Mord's ability to execute a double attack. He questioned how Mord had managed to master it so quickly and deduced that Mord had intentionally blocked his previous attack to steal his skill. Kestner's hand began to glow, signaling his intent to use his full power. He commended Mord's abilities and expressed his increasing interest in the battle, urging Mord to give his best effort. As the tension escalated, Archduke intervened and commanded Kestner to back off. Approaching Mord, Archduke acknowledged Mord's impressive progress despite awakening his new blood power only recently. Mord humbly downplayed the praise. Archduke extended his glowing hand toward Mord, expressing a desire to check something further. Mord was taken aback as he realized Kestner was attacking him with Impulse Ball. He attempted to block the energy ball with his hands, feeling the strain on his body. He contemplated whether he had no choice but to use his new blood power, but then had a realization. He remembered his fight with Fionn, realizing that if he used Impulse as well, he could block the attack. Activating Impulse, Mord successfully blocked the attack, surprising Archduke, who observed the scene. Todd, too, was astonished, finding it impossible that Mord could already utilize Impulse after awakening his new blood power. Mord recognized his unique talent, being able to observe someone using a skill and quickly replicate it. Archduke acknowledged Mord's performance, impressed by his abilities. In Mord's thoughts, he harbored resentment towards Archduke, perceiving him as someone who only valued those useful to him as his bloodline. He harbored a desire to one day confront Archduke. Archduke, satisfied with Mord's performance, offered him a reward for passing the test. He asked Mord if there was something he desired, whether it be unimaginable wealth or a mentor for training, emphasizing that anything was possible. Mord was surprised by the opportunity presented to him, but he already knew what he needed to ask for. His priority was to collect the world fragments before Aiden could, in order to prevent the destruction of their world. With determination, Mord stated that he didn't require material possessions or mentorship. Archduke was intrigued by Mord's response, asking him what he truly desired. Mord revealed his ambition, expressing his wish to challenge the god of combat's grave. In the world of magician who dominates the world, there existed perilous locations known as dungeons. These dungeons, like those found in other fantasy realms, were dangerous places teeming with monsters. However, what set these dungeons apart was that they were symptoms of the other world's erosion. Unlike conventional dungeons, which were typically formed through the overlapping of different realms, these dungeons emerged in areas where this world and another world intersected. As a result, abnormal phenomena occurred within them. Most dungeons in this world were intertwined with the demon realm, and the majority of the world's monsters originated from these dungeons. However, the god of combat's grave, believed to be the place where the god of combat, Vernars, was created, was distinct from other dungeons. It had no connection to overlapping with another world. This sacred location was where the world fragment was concealed. Archduke fell into deep thought, contemplating the decision at hand. Mord, in his own mind, wondered if he had asked too early, sensing a hint of uncertainty in the air. Finally, the Archduke spoke and inquired about Mord's reason for desiring to challenge the god of combat's grave. Mord responded, explaining that he had heard rumors of the traces left behind by Vernars, the god of combat, within the grave. He expressed his desire to personally witness the origins of his bloodline that he felt when he awakened to his new powers. Kessner observed Mord and thought to himself that the young man was more immature than he had initially perceived. He understood the significance of the god of combat's grave as the site of the coming-of-age ceremony for the direct bloodlines, and considered Mord's request to be a direct challenge to those bloodlines. He believed that someone like Mord, born outside the direct bloodline, would not be allowed entry. However, contrary to Kessner's expectations, the Archduke responded with a surprising decision. He acknowledged that while it was uncommon, there had been instances in the past where individuals from outside bloodlines entered the dungeon for exploratory purposes. Although it had not occurred during his generation, he granted Mord's request. Turning to Kessner, the Archduke asked if he also desired to enter the god of combat's grave. Kessner, bowing down, hesitated in his response. Mord, perceiving Kessner's unspoken wish, understood that he too longed to taste the privileges reserved for the direct bloodlines. The Archduke then addressed Mord, informing him that it was too early for him to undertake such a challenge. He emphasized that he could not send someone who was unqualified into the grave. However, he offered Mord a chance to prove himself and granted him permission to challenge the god of combat's grave on the day he became an official warrior. Mord, with a smile, accepted the Archduke's decision, understanding that his journey to become a warrior was not far off. He resolved to surpass the protagonist of the novel, Aiden, and achieve his goals. Kessner observed Mord leaving and wondered if he had mentioned his name as Mord. The Archduke inquired about Kessner's thoughts regarding the kid. Kessner, having fought Mord personally, believed that he was concealing a lot and hadn't given his best effort during their battle. The Archduke mentioned that Mord seemed to have put in his best effort while handling the impulse ball, showing an ability to learn body impulse on the spot. Kessner acknowledged that some individuals possess the ability to learn quickly, but what surprised him the most was Mord's mana level, despite his lack of control over it. The Archduke compared Mord's mana to Erna's but hesitated to say more. The Archduke thought about Mord, reflecting on his peculiarly desireless eyes. He contrasted Mord's eyes with the eyes of his other illegitimate sons, who all sought validation from him. The Archduke smirked, realizing that Mord strongly resembled his mother, Reyna, and considered him an intriguing individual. Mord arrived at the training ground, relieved to escape the boredom of the past 4 days and eager to finally learn something useful. He overheard 2 trainees discussing a selection process for 5 of the Vernars' bastard children to challenge the god of combat's grave. With Kessner and Viscount Owen already among the participants, 3 spots remained. The expedition aimed to decipher the pattern analysis of the god of combat's grave, as it changed instead of disappearing once cleared, reducing the risk for those from the direct bloodline. Mord decided to give it a try as well and realized he needed to hasten his journey to become a warrior. Level 3 instructor Daisley arrived and inquired if everyone was present. One of the trainees replied that Fionn was the only one who was absent. Mord looked at the person and wondered if he was the instructor. Daisley instructed them to prepare for training as usual. He then turned to Mord and asked if he was the new guy. Mord confirmed that he was. Daisley informed Mord that he couldn't participate in the current lesson because he had just joined, and advised him to ask the other students for help in catching up after the lesson. Confused, Mord asked if Daisley wouldn't be teaching him and requested to know who would be a good choice to seek guidance from. Daisley responded with annoyance, pointing out Mord's audacity to make demands after injuring the captain so severely upon joining. Mord defended himself, stating that he had already been punished accordingly and that it was determined that the captain was at fault. Daisley reprimanded Mord for talking back, criticizing his supposed arrogance and disrespect towards adults. Mord clarified that he was not talking back but making a reasonable request, emphasizing Daisley's responsibility as the instructor. Suddenly, Daisley kicked Mord in the stomach, then grabbed his shirt, ordering him to run laps around the training grounds until the end of the day's training. Daisley expected Mord to maintain a constant speed while also listening to the lesson. He smirked, warning Mord that he would be further punished if he couldn't answer any questions after the lesson. Struggling to control his anger, Mord thought angrily about Daisley's actions. Daisley noticed Mord's hands glowing with mana and speculated if he was extruding mana, challenging his authority as an instructor. Daisley retaliated by punching Mord in the face, emphasizing the absolute authority of an instructor and threatening to kick him out if he resisted. He demanded that Mord answer his question and understand the consequences. Mord contemplated the idea of punching Daisley, but decided against it, realizing that causing conflict might interfere with his test to become a warrior and his goal of entering the God of Combat's grave. He acknowledged the need to hold back his anger and focus on his objective. Mord obediently responded to Daisley, expressing his understanding. Daisley instructed him to go run, and Mord complied. Daisley, however, held a grudge against Mord and seemed to take pleasure in punishing him for even the smallest offenses. Daisley abused his authority, punishing trainees both verbally and physically without mercy, leaving them with no means of resistance. During Mord's training, as he performed a one-handed handstand, Daisley accused him of disobeying and not maintaining a constant speed. Mord recognized Daisley's justification for the abuse as an attempt to control him, considering his display of mana in front of the other trainees. Daisley ordered Mord to remain in that position until the end of the day's training, threatening punishment if he moved even an inch. As Daisley left, Mord reflected on his decision to endure the abuse in the hope of learning something valuable from Daisley. However, it became apparent that real training was necessary for him to grow stronger. In a separate room, Daisley expressed his frustration and labeled Mord as an arrogant bastard. He pondered how Mord, without any notable lineage or formal training, had become such a formidable individual. Daisley punched the wall, determined to break Mord and manipulate the situation to his advantage. He believed that Mord would eventually succumb to his methods, convinced that things would go his way. Mord stood confidently before Daisley and declared his intention to take the test to become a warrior. The other trainees were shocked by his words, considering that while he may have defeated Fionn, they believed he still had much to learn. Daisley, filled with anger, questioned Mord's decision and sanity, emphasizing that he hadn't even mastered all the necessary skills to become a warrior. Unfazed, Mord confronted Daisley, attributing his incomplete training to the instructor's negligence. He boldly expressed doubt about Daisley's qualifications as a teacher. Daisley scoffed, claiming that Mord had lost his mind and dismissing his claims. He asserted his authority as the one who judged who was fit to take the warrior test, implying that he would never allow Mord to partake after the things he had said. Mord smirked and confidently responded, asserting that Daisley didn't have the right to make such a statement. He then formally requested a God of Combat's spirit from instructor Daisley. This term referred to the sacred practice of dueling, where the strong were considered right. The God of Combat would bestow their blessing upon a true warrior, and engaging in this duel determined who was in the right. Daisley, taken aback, questioned how Mord knew about this practice. Mord brushed off the question, stating that it didn't matter. According to Vernar's laws, as a trainee, he had the privilege to request a God of Combat's spirit from the instructor. He intended to use this privilege to prove that Daisley was not qualified to be his instructor. According to the legends, Vernar's, the God of Combat, grew up unaware of his true identity. During his youth, he endured harassment from those who claimed to be his instructors, but could not prove their qualifications. In response, Vernar's passed down a message to his descendants: those who dictate over others without the ability to prove their qualifications deserve to die. As a result, Vernar's law allows trainees to request a God of Combat's spirit from their instructors. Mord contemplated the fact that even the God of Combat wasn't entirely sane, but he saw the benefit in this situation. However, Daisley grabbed Mord by the shirt, asserting that he was just a kid and far too young to speak of such a sacred ritual. Mord responded with a cold tone, reminding Daisley that he didn't have the right to deny a God of Combat's spirit. Mord then walked into the center of the grounds and shouted with mana embedded in his words, formally requesting a God of Combat's spirit from level 3 instructor Daisley. He repeated his request, making it clear and demanding. Daisley looked at Mord in shock, his expression filled with disbelief. But Mord spoke up, informing Daisley that he had the choice to either accept or deny his request. Mord warned Daisley that if he planned on denying it, he would reveal the truth to everyone, expressing his lack of trust in the witnesses present. Daisley, infuriated, questioned whether Mord thought he could get away with such behavior. With bluish mana enveloping him, Mord made it clear that this was Daisley's last chance. He expressed his unwillingness to waste any more time on someone he considered trash, further emphasizing his disdain for Daisley's actions and character. Daisley couldn't help but wonder about the immense energy Mord displayed. He questioned whether the mana Mord had shown in his fight with Fionn was just a fraction of his true capabilities. However, Daisley couldn't back off from the challenge. Despite acknowledging Mord's talent, he still saw him as a kid, not yet an official warrior. In anger, Daisley agreed to the duel but attempted to decide the time for it. However, Mord didn't allow Daisley to have that control, and promptly declared that the duel would take place in an hour at the current location. Daisley questioned Mord's decision, but Mord confidently explained that the challenger had the right to choose the time and place. He accused Daisley of being cunning and expressed his unwillingness to waste any more time on him, even giving Daisley the option to run away if he wished. Daisley couldn't believe the situation, thinking to himself about the unexpected appearance of someone like Mord, whom he considered to be a psycho. Meanwhile, Kessner, in his office, overheard Mord's request for a duel and found himself intrigued. He recognized that it was unusual for a trainee to request a god of combat spirit from an instructor. He had already sensed that Mord was not an ordinary kid, but he was entertained by Mord's actions in ways he couldn't have predicted. Kessner called his servant and instructed them to prepare for his departure to the level 3 training facility. As Mord yawned, people observed him and remarked that he looked younger than expected. They wondered how Daisley ended up having to duel against such a young kid. Nevertheless, they expressed their excitement, noting that this was the first time in 5 years that they had witnessed something so entertaining. Mord confidently approached Daisley, noting that he didn't run away as Mord had expected. Daisley, filled with anger, declared that he would spare Mord's life but make him regret his arrogance. In response, Mord provocatively asked if he heard a dog barking somewhere, further infuriating Daisley. Just then, someone arrived, causing a stir among the onlookers. It was Sir Kessner, whose unexpected presence surprised everyone. A trainee exclaimed that it was Sir Kessner and wondered why he was there. Mord took the opportunity to ask Sir Kessner the reason for his presence. Daisley was shocked that Mord knew Kessner and realized that Mord's arrogance was not unfounded and that he had Kessner to support him. Kessner explained that he had heard about something interesting happening and decided to come. He questioned the idea of a god of combat spirit between a trainee and an instructor, expressing his curiosity about the situation. Mord defended his actions, stating that he had no other choice when faced with an instructor who neglected his duties and seemed to have corrupt thoughts. Daisley, unable to contain his anger, insulted Mord once again. Kessner found the situation amusing and chuckled and considered Mord to be a funny guy. He then asked Mord if he was confident in his ability to win, warning him not to underestimate Daisley despite his retirement. Mord assured Kessner that he was confident and thanked him for his concern. Daisley, still furious, expressed his desire to punch Mord but mentioned that he had requested another instructor as a witness and told Mord to wait. Unexpectedly, Kessner shocked Daisley by suggesting that if the instructor had not arrived yet, he could take on the role of being the witness himself. The trainees were in utter shock upon hearing that Sir Kessner would be the witness for the God of Combat Spirit duel. They couldn't believe their ears and wondered who this kid Mord really was. Daisley was worried and unsure of the situation and expressed his concerns to Sir Kessner. Kessner reaffirmed his decision, stating that he was indeed qualified to be the witness. Daisley was still feeling uneasy and mentioned that Sir Kessner was a busy person and questioned his availability for such a role. In response, Kessner challenged Daisley's assumption, asking if he was looking down on him at that moment. He pointed out that Daisley seemed to be mistaken, thinking that their relationship as instructor and student made them equals. Kessner emphasized his status as the Viscount of Windsor and asserted his authority. Daisley, with his head hung low, apologized to Kessner. Internally, he gritted his teeth, feeling humiliated by the turn of events. Mord interrupted the conversation, apologizing for the interruption and noting that it was almost time to begin. Sir Kessner expressed his anticipation for the fight and hoped that he hadn't come all the way there for nothing. Mord then looked at Daisley with a smirk and proposed starting the duel. Daisley, filled with anger, commented on Mord overpowering Fionn's body impulse with just body reinforcement. He warned Mord that he would regret it if that was all he had. Daisley's sword started glowing with red mana as he challenged Mord to see if he could block his sword impulse. Mord found Daisley's reaction amusing, causing Daisley to question him. Mord's body started glowing with bluish mana as he corrected Daisley's assumption, stating that he wouldn't give his all in a fight against a trainee like Fionn. Daisley was shocked, realizing that Mord had learned body impulse as well. Mord launched an attack at Daisley, who swung his sword in response. However, Daisley was pushed back by Mord's punch, leaving him astonished. Mord continued his assault, and this time Daisley managed to block the attack with his shield. Daisley admitted that Mord was definitely fit to be a warrior, acknowledging his strength. However, he emphasized that experience was more important than strength and claimed that Mord lacked deep knowledge of mana combat techniques. Daisley's shield started glowing red, and Mord was pushed back slightly. Daisley prepared to launch another attack, asserting that Mord, being 10 years younger, was not ready to fight him. Daisley swung his sword at Mord, who managed to dodge the attack. However, the sword scratched Mord's face, causing some of his hair to be cut by the sword impulse. Daisley shouted, proclaiming that he had survived countless battlefields and near-death situations, and challenged Mord for daring to request a god of combat's spirit with him as the opponent. He refused to be looked down upon by a kid like Mord. Daisley launched another attack, but this time Mord jumped back to avoid it. Mord landed at a distance and assessed Daisley, acknowledging that Daisley was right about him lacking experience and skills. Kestner observed the fight and contemplated the situation. He recognized that even though Mord was talented, his combat skills were still at a beginner level. Kestner understood the importance of experience and realized that if Mord were to lose here, he would have to leave the place, as Daisley would make sure of it. Kestner wondered what Mord would do next. Daisley smirked and taunted Mord, asking if he finally had nothing to say. However, Mord appeared calm and responded by acknowledging that Daisley's skills weren't bad, despite him being expired trash. Daisley accused Mord of being arrogant and pretending to be strong because he couldn't handle the situation otherwise. Mord, with a confident demeanor, expressed that Daisley was solidifying himself as an unqualified instructor. Daisley, determined to prove himself, offered to train Mord right there and then. However, Mord dismissed the idea as an impossible wish, referring to Daisley as a boomer. Mord's body began to emit a more intense bluish mana, surpassing the level he had previously shown. Daisley recognized the energy and wondered if it could be what he thought. Suddenly, a tremendous amount of energy spread around Mord, and his hair turned white. Daisley was shocked beyond belief, realizing that Mord had already learned the technique known as New Blood Unlock. He deemed it impossible for Mord to have acquired such knowledge. Mord approached Daisley, stating that it was his first time fighting in this manner and admitting that he didn't know how to hold back. He even warned Daisley that he might end up killing him, leaving Daisley filled with disbelief and shock.